Hey, I played Avengers, the real game, the full game, not the beta, the real actual game with the whole campaign and everything, and I'm still playing it. I'm having a good time. I wanted to talk about the campaign a little bit, so we're gonna do that. Just a disclaimer, I'm basically only talking about the campaign here and the main line, like, of Avengers Reassemble campaign missions. Technically, the campaign, the Avengers Reassemble missions, include, like, the character-specific iconic missions and some faction missions after you beat the main story, but I'm not talking about those. I'm just talking about the main line, Avengers Reassemble campaign missions, the mostly single-player ones. So we're gonna talk about those. Alright, so some overall thoughts before we get into spoilers and everything, which there aren't too many of, but I'll get into those. Overall, this campaign is pretty good. It's not great, but it's really chunky enough for, you know, an MMO-style live service campaign thing. You really just have to set your expectations, which I did and tried to do as much as possible. Obviously, if you go into this game expecting Spider-Man PS4 or God of War PS4, a story like that, you're not going to get that. It's not going to be of that quality caliber, especially presentation-wise. But, you know, if you go in expecting, like, an MMO or a live service looter shooter story, this one's probably gonna be pretty high up there, if you ask me. And that's especially for two reasons, one of which has to do with gameplay, and the other is just acting for the most part. So I wanted to specifically talk about the acting and the performances and the character interactions, because that is one of the two things where I think this campaign really like hits its stride, is when the characters are interacting and this incredible voice cast is, you know, at their A game here, no pun intended. I really latched on to Bruce Banner in this, Troy Baker's Bruce Banner. For some reason, I never thought I would like really be into the Bruce Banner character, but the way that he's written, with the sort of shaky confidence and very self-conscious version of himself that he is here, and Troy Baker's, you know, performance enhancing those words, is really well done, especially when he's interacting with Ms. Marvel, Kamala Khan, who, that is like kind of the center of this campaign, is, first of all, just Ms. Marvel in general, and her relationship with Bruce, and how she inspires Bruce to act again and become a hero again and reassemble the Avengers, while he is acting as sort of a backbone that is only reinforced because she is there. Like, obviously Bruce is pretty depressed here, he's been the Hulk for a while. Ms. Marvel kind of brings him out of that and teaches him again, like, you know, yes, the Hulk is a burden, but he's done some good with it, and he's still a brilliant scientist on his own, so... And it's just great. It's just really well done, really well performed. Okay, so the other thing that I think makes this campaign hold up really well and just makes it a lot of fun to play are what I've kind of dubbed like the escape sections. You're not always escaping from things when you do these, but they're the big, like, you're running away from something, or you're running to something, or, you know, you're just running through an area. It's these big sections that remind me of similar sections in Metroidvania games. Specifically, they made me think of the Ori games, where after a big boss fight or after a big area, you find someone and he's like chasing you, and you have to run and do all these intricate platforming things. And there's a lot of that in this game, and they're just presented really well. There's one of these at the A-Day demo with Black Widow. They're all over the place. Ms. Marvel has quite a few of them. They're really good. They're really fun. And there's one specific one that I want to talk about in the spoilers section that is probably where this campaign is at its best, but I'll get to that. So those are the points where the campaign is at its best. I do obviously have some criticisms about the campaign and the game as a whole. This is not a perfect game by any means. Good, not great is a great way to describe this current state of this game. It's a great foundation that has a lot to build on, or I guess a good foundation that has a lot to build on. But that being said, I do have some criticisms, so I'm going to talk about those. Again, we're specifically talking about the campaign here, so I'm not going to talk about a lot of gameplay criticisms here. The story itself, like the actual plot of, you know, Inhumans bad, AIM good, it's a little played out. We've seen stuff like this before, and it especially feels weird coming years after the Inhumans push was said and done. This game just constantly kept reminding me of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., which I'll talk a little bit about later, just because that was another product of the time of Marvel pushing mutants down and raising Inhumans up, and this story was created around that time too. It's just that games take a lot longer to develop and actually get out there. So we're just now getting to that. And that does make me interested for the future of this story and how long it's going to take for us to stick away from Inhumans and start going either towards mutants or just its own story, a more Avengers-focused story. I don't really care either way. Inhumans, they're just being used as a plot device here, but again, we've seen this done before, and maybe not better, but just we've seen it done before, so it feels a little stale, and the story itself, you know, it's been done before. But luckily, that's not really the focus here. The focus seems to be a lot more on character, which that's what I'm more into. All of the characters here are what is really on display. And that's great. Honestly, the only character that I didn't think was too great, and it was mostly due to the writing, was Monica, who is the second-in-command at AIM. She's basically like, she's MODOK's second-in-command. She's the chief technical officer of AIM, I believe. And she's fine. Like, in the cutscenes, there's nothing, like, too big a deal about her. She's just, you know, the classic, like, oh, she's the one who's actually pulling all the strings in the background, and she's the lead scientist and everything. But also, if you read the codex entries, she gets a lot worse. Like, my opinion on her, like, went to bad from neutral after reading the codex entries, because the codex entries are really, like, mustache-twirly, villainous, like, ooh, I'm a sociopath, and I know I'm a sociopath, and I kill everyone that I come in contact with because I'm evil, and that's how you know I'm evil. It's like, okay, calm down. Whose sociopathic wet dream was this character that is just boring? Like, there's no extra dimensions to her. She is just mustache twirly villain girl. If you ignore the codex entries, though, she's mostly fine, and some scenes towards the end of the game actually make her character a little more interesting. But hey, don't read codex entries, I guess. So the missions themselves, the actual, you know, gameplay missions that you play, are mostly fun. Most of the single-player ones, the ones that you can only do single-player, are great, but once it starts introducing you to the multiplayer content, they're still technically part of the campaign, but you can do them multiplayer. That's where they get a little shaky, because they're just like, okay, we're just gonna port over this version of the multiplayer content and throw some, you know, some voice lines over it to make it feel like it's more integrated into the campaign. And that's a little lazy. IMO, I feel like they could have spent some more time to tune those multiplayer missions down and boil them more down into a single-player experience that had more unique gameplay going on, instead of just, you know, throwing these missions in there to make the campaign longer. Quality over quantity, blah, blah, blah. They're still fun, and they do serve as a good intro for those types of multiplayer missions that you'll be getting to later, along with showcasing all of the environments that you're going to be playing as in the multiplayer once you beat the game or the campaign. But I feel like they could have done that in a way that made it more interesting, where it's more single player focused, and it's like, here's a version of that you're going to do in the multiplayer once you get there, instead of just being like, okay, you're going to do a vault now, and also we're going to copy paste that vault, and you're going to do it in the post game as well, and the same with the control missions and all the drop zones and stuff. Some more time could have been dealt to those to bring them up to the level of most of the actual single-player missions, I think. It just did confirm my suspicion that missions like A-Day, where you're switching between each Avenger and it's very single-player and there's really not much way you could make that into a multiplayer repeatable mission, kind of comes true. My fear about that from the beta. There are more missions like A-Day in the game, but they're very few and far between, and I just wish there were more of them. And the last complaint that I have before we get into spoilers is just that I really don't like how much of the campaign they showed off in trailers leading up to the game. And again, this is kind of an expectations thing. I know live service games and MMOs, at least in my head, I don't care about spoilers as much for, because I'm more focused on the gameplay than I am the story, but this time I'm in an interesting position where I do really care about the story, and I would have liked to have more surprises. But literally in the trailers, in the few trailers that they released for this game, like after they just were showing A-Day, and I kind of realize now why they were just showing A-Day, when they started showing more, they showed a scene, or multiple scenes, from pretty much every mission in the campaign, with the exception of one that I'll talk about in the spoiler section, because it was a spoiler. And you know, some people might be fine with that, but I made an 18-minute video on why I don't like trailers because they spoil too much, and this is a very egregious example of that, so that's all I'm saying. Also, speaking of story and you know, leading up to the game, spoilers and stuff like that, Am I the only one that remembers the developers talking about how there were going to be Avengers missions before A-Day? Like, we would get to play in the current normal before shit hit the fan? I remember people talking about that. Like, specifically devs saying, like, okay, A-Day is not the first mission. A-Day is actually a couple hours into the game, which I was, like, really excited for because they weren't showing us anything from before A-Day. I was like, oh, cool, so we'll get to play as all of these Avengers for, like, 1 or 2 missions before, you know, everything goes away, and we get a taste of what we're fighting to reassemble. I thought that would have been really cool. I don't know if I'm crazy and I'm, like, pulling that out of my ass when I remember hearing people talk about that. Maybe that changed in the development cycle and they just never mentioned it since. Or maybe, again, I'm crazy. Either way, that would have been really cool. Maybe they were just talking about the Kamala mission, like, right before, you know, the actual bridge demo thing. I don't know. Am I an insane person? Let me know if you have memories of this. Maybe it's a Mandela effect thing. Who knows? All right, spoiler time. Again, there's really not much to spoil with this game, especially because a lot of the spoilers that I'm going to talk about are pretty goddamn predictable. But hey, again, this game thrives on character, not story, so shh. All right, the best mission in the campaign that I've been hinting towards so far is, drumroll please, the one where Captain America is alive and not dead. Very surprising, right? Cap's alive? And we've been telling you he's dead, but we've been promoting skins and gameplay and stuff for this character the whole time? Wow! Seriously though, the lead up to actually finding out the where and how of Captain America still being alive 5 years post A-Day is so well done. Basically, you're on this spaceship as Iron Man after this very strange section of flying up into the atmosphere to get to said spaceship, which was kind of cool. And it's just this, like, dread-fueled, dark, like, atmosphere-dripping space station that you're walking through as Iron Man, and the whole time you're picking up codex entries from Monica talking about how Subject is being hidden from MODOK, and MODOK doesn't know what Subject's true purpose is, and it's, like, implying that it's this Inhuman that is super scary, and the atmosphere and the tone of it is just like, oh shit, I'm about to fight a boss, it's gonna be a really spooky, scary Inhuman, it's probably gonna be some, like, really cool pull from the comics, like Lash or something, I don't know. And then you open the door, and it's Captain America, and you're like, whoa, I didn't expect that, even though that makes 100% sense, and is completely narratively satisfying. In that moment, I did not expect that. I expected to fight some weird boss, or maybe some throwaway Inhuman that they made up for the game. But no, we got Steve Rogers in that moment, and it was such a cool reveal. It was so well done. And immediately after that, when you finally get control of Captain America, and he's in his, like, weird, like, very cool test subject outfit, you're jumping around walls and double jumping and doing all this stuff in one of the very cool escape sequences that I was talking about earlier, and it's probably the best one, because of the you know, tonal trickery that they pulled with the reveal of Cap being alive, with me playing the beta and not knowing at all how Cap moves because he wasn't in that, being shown his very unique movement system that I'm sure will be applied to Spider-Man and other characters down the line. It's so cool. It was just a lot of fun to see that, and to have that tense moment kind of be pulled out from under you in a way that is very narratively satisfying. Was just super well done, and I honestly feel like this was like the peak of the campaign for me, was this moment right here. So that's the main spoiler, I guess. You know, there is a post and mid-credit scene, which I'll talk about, but there's really not much to spoil in this game, which is great, I think. You know, there's no, like, this character dies, or this character's alive. I mean, you could say Cap is alive, but if you didn't think that, your brain is puny. Unless you actually didn't think that, in which case, I'm sorry, read more comic books. Or just watch more trailers. I don't know. I don't know how to... I'm trying to be nice here. Regardless, like, the real spoiler is seeing how he came back, and seeing him reunite with his teammates and reassemble the Avengers finally. And you can't really spoil that. You know, that's something that you have to experience and show. The only spoiler to that is actually showing someone that scene. Like, you can't just go into the comments and say, Captain America reunites with the Avengers, and that's like a spoiler that everyone's mad at, because it's just like, yeah, obviously. So I like when stories can't really be spoiled by one sentence. I think that is it's telling that you're not relying on some random linchpin to make your story that much better and elevated by just like a reference or some drastic thing happening, which that can be fun, and spoilers like that are, you know, fun and can add a lot to your story, but when your story can't be ruined by one sentence, it's probably a stronger story than the one that, like, the whole impetus is, uh-oh, Captain America dies. You know, like, that's not fun. Be more intricate, be more subtle than that. They did here, and that's great. Okay, so mid and post-credit scene, because of course they have one. This is a slightly MCU well, heavily inspired by the MCU work. The mid-credit scene. Okay, disclaimer, what I'm about to talk about is two scenes that are in the post-credit scene. I just thought one was the mid and one was the post. They're just both after the credits. Yeah, so... but they still exist, so here you go. Basically, the big Kree sentry that you fight in the end is as big ol' Miss Marvel. Very cool sequence, by the way. It opens up, like its chest opens up, and a little woo, like a thing shoots off into space. To me, that means that it's like a thing that's calling the Kree back home, because Inhumans are a thing now. Sort of like in Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., where that beacon spun up and it called the Kree back home, and they were like, I gotta kill the Inhumans, they're weapons of mass destruction, they're gonna kill us all, we don't want them here. Good plot point. Again, if they do that the same way they did it in Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., it's gonna feel weird, but I will accept it because we'll have a whole new faction of blue guys to kill, and that's a fun time. The post-credit scene I actually thought was a lot more interesting in terms of writing. The mid-credits was just a tease of what's to come, but the post-credits it's setting up why we're still fighting AIM after we beat MODOK at the end of the game, so the multiplayer kind of makes narrative sense, by putting Monica, who didn't die, at the helm of AIM. She's the new Scientist Supreme, and it also is paired with the reveal that she has been cloning herself and working on cloning this whole time, and that's kind of AIM's new focus, which I find very interesting, especially in the way that they did it. It kind of pans out of these two clones who both have heterochromia. She has one green eye and one, like, brownish eye. And you realize in that moment, hey, the Monica we've been looking at the entire time has also had heterochromia. And when it reveals who's talking in the post-credit scene, it's Monica, but she has two green eyes, which is really cool. And also, it's a reveal that was actually elevated by those codex entries that I talked down on earlier, because you see this reveal completely coming the whole time. If you read the codex entries and if you pay a little more attention during the actual story cutscenes. From the beginning, you see Monica analyzing and heavily, like, being obsessed with this Inhuman called Jessica Yi, who I think might have been the first Inhuman, like, from 8A. I'm not sure on that. Either way, she's really looking into this one Inhuman, and her ability is to clone herself, which, interestingly enough, Jessica Yi has red hair and is made up for this game, and the Inhuman in Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. who can clone herself also has red hair and was made up for that show. I don't know if these games, or that show and this game, just have a lot of, like, parallel thinking happening, or if one is aping off the other. That wouldn't really make any sense. I think this is just a really strange amount of coincidences of just, like, if Inhumans are your impetus, this is where the story will naturally go, including Kree coming home to roost, having a red-headed Inhuman who can clone herself, and I guess Quake showing up eventually, because there are lots of hints toward Quake, and also in the leaked list, Quake is on there, which is so exciting to me. It's a fun time. It really doesn't, like, tease much aside from making the multiplayer make more sense post the campaign, and I guess teasing that AIM's focus is now cloning, and Monica has a bunch of clones around her doing her bidding, which I don't really know what that could be setting up. There might be some comic book thing that I don't fully know about. I haven't read every AIM comic in the known world, but let me know. Maybe they're just gonna clone a bunch of Inhumans. I know that's kind of their goal, is to clone a bunch of Inhumans, make an Inhuman army, so maybe we're just gonna fight Inhumans as the next faction, and Kree, who knows. So at the end of the day, it's a pretty good campaign. It's good, not great. I liked a lot about it. I think it could have been done a lot better, but again, if you go in setting your expectations, not low, but, like, you know, pivoted, not to expect Spider-Man PS4 and to expect, like, Destiny 2 story, which I've heard is awful, then you'll probably get something surprising and fun to go through. And I think that is an honest view on what this story is. It's just fun. It has a lot of good character interactions, and it lays a very solid groundwork for future stories with more characters and stuff. And that's, as a live service game, that is really what interests me here, is how they're going to go forward with this, with the, the minor character releases, and hopefully in the future the bigger expansions that will release a lot of characters and new areas and stuff. There's a solid, rock solid foundation here that can be built upon for years to come, and I hope it keeps me interested enough to come back to it for those years to come, which I think it will, but again, time will tell, so we'll see. That's it. Bye.